Hello, this is Mrs. Politsky, and I have World History Notes for Chapter 14, Section 1, The High Middle Ages. So before we begin, you may want to find your packet so that we can get started. In Chapter 14, Section 1, we're going to talk a little bit about an event that was known as the Crusades, sometimes known as a Holy War. And it all kind of begins kind of on a sour note. In the sense that now we're going to be finding ourselves in a situation where Christians are going to be fighting at times with different religious groups. And we're going to talk a little bit about the good and the bad that kind of happened along the way. So we're going to begin talking a little bit about how this all started. And kind of for a number of years, Muslims had occupied what was known as the Holy Land or Jerusalem, but they had allowed Jews and Christians to kind of live and travel there for roughly 400 years, beginning in the 80s, 600s, shortly after the birth of the Islamic religion. And around the year 1000, Muslim Seljuk Turks had conquered the Holy Land. They'd also conquered the Byzantine Empire capital of Constantinople. And if you remember back, we had talked a little bit about the rise of Islam. And it's kind of during this attack that we see the final fall of the eastern half of the Roman Empire, and the city of Constantinople is going to be renamed Istanbul. Okay, the Seljuk Turks are sometimes also known as the Ottoman. And this is just an image of when the Ottoman, for the most part, had conquered the city of Constantinople. Pope Urban II called for the First Crusades in around the year 1095, and he did so because he believed that God wills it. There were two major leaders of the First Crusade. First was Peter the Hermit, who you see right there, and Walter the Penniless, who is depicted right here. After about 2 months after they had reached and besieged the city of Jerusalem in around the year 1099, Crusaders entered and slaughtered Muslim and Jewish inhabitants, which is not necessarily kind of the brighter side of the Crusades. Unfortunately, we're going to find that there's going to be more animosity between different religious groups as we go along here in history. The goal of each of the crusades that's going to follow the First Crusade is to take the city of Jerusalem and the Holy Land away from the Muslims who had controlled it at that time. European Jews also became targets of some of the peasant crusaders. Not all the crusaders or crusades traveled water routes. In some cases, they followed overland routes across Europe. And along the way, some of these peasant crusaders came across communities where Jews had lived and attacked them, forcing them to either convert or to kill them. And unfortunately, that wasn't really what the church had called for. It went against the local offices of the church and also the clergy. And this is something that the church has had to repent over the years. Also in the First Crusades, the Knights had captured the city of Jerusalem, and they also had established 4 kingdoms. Unfortunately, these kingdoms are not going to last for a long period of time. If you take a look here, we have, Jerusalem proper here, the county of Tripoli, the Principality of Antioch, and the country of Edessa. And bordering that, you see Armenia and the Byzantine Empire, or what was left of that. In 1144, Muslims came back and sieged the city of Edessa, which was in the north. And this led European leaders to call for a second crusade, which was unfortunately a failure. Several years later, a third crusade rose in 1187 under the Muslim leadership of Saladin. They had recaptured the city of Jerusalem, And during the 1200s, they reclaimed control of the entire region known as Palestine. Richard the Lionhearted and Saladin would confront one another during this crusade, and interesting enough, they had respected each other. Both men were very strong military leaders. Both were, for the most part, pretty courteous. But for the most part, it was a very difficult situation for Christian crusaders. Many crusades would follow and fail. Crusaders lacked sufficient money and shoes, which made it very difficult for our soldiers to stay motivated. The Fourth Crusade was pretty tragic. It's sometimes known as the Children's Crusade, and there was this belief that only the purest of heart could take over the Holy Land, and so somebody thought it would be a great idea to send orphan children to go and storm the beaches of the eastern part of the Mediterranean, and unfortunately these children were slaughtered along the way. Number 11, the Crusades increased the power of the kings and decreased the power of the nobles in their system of feudalism. Western Europe saw an increase in trade, especially those of spices, sugar, silk, and luxury items. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the Middle East was kind of the crossroads between Asia and Europe, and this is where a lot of those products would be funneling through. Also, increasingly sophisticated technology entered Europe in the forms of ships and navigational aids and military skills and equipment. Thank you very much.